Well, welcome to Crosspoint this morning, and please welcome to the stage Scott and Emmy Gwines this morning. To continue our month of missions, I've invited this father-daughter duo to talk to us about their experience in missions. So let's just start there. Tell us about just your background in missions.
So I've been going to Camp of the Hills for the last 5 years, which, has anyone been to Camp of the Hills in here? I know y'all have. So basically, we just go and we're the kitchen staff for a week at this church camp for underprivileged kids. And we just serve. We give the food to the counselors for them to serve the kids and just get to watch them enjoy the meals. And then I've been going to Honduras for the last 3 years.
Like a lot of people in here, I grew up doing missions work, short, medium, long-term type missions. And so I got to know what the blessings were that you got from doing that work. So 8 or 9 years ago when, I guess it wasn't Will, Jason? Jason invited us to go. They needed some help, and so he said, hey, will you help with Camp of the Hills? And the one thing I learned is when God comes knocking, you might want to go. And it's one of the biggest blessings I've had is the last 8, 9 years going to Camp of the Hills. And then I guess 3 years ago, Carson was like, hey, why don't you go to Honduras with us? And again, God comes knocking, you better go. And again, it's been a great blessing, especially to share it with my daughter.
Yeah. So you guys both have a kind of an extensive history, and I think you've been back so many times. You know, why do you go, or why do you keep going back?
I feel like for both of them, but like especially Honduras, it's just the kids. It's getting to see them grow up and kind of, you start recognizing faces. You'll go back to the same schools every year and just see how these kids grow, how they enjoy just you being there, getting to play with them.
And she kills them at soccer, too. For me, it's fun. I wish I could have a really spiritual answer, but it's fun. It's not easy. Camp of the Hills is not for everybody. It's hard work. Is it hard work? That's really as hard as it is. Honduras is hard too. It's loud. It doesn't smell so good. But when you're doing God's work, it's a blessing, and it's happy. On top of that, you get to spend, a week with your kids with no cell phone. They got to hang out with you. They don't have any other fun. At least that's Honduras. But Camp of the Hills especially, for those of you who have gotten to go, again, not for everybody, but to watch these kids grow up is a blessing. Heck, first time I went, Sam was this tall, and he was dancing around making jokes, and now look at him. He's full grown and an awesome young man. And just to watch the younger ones become the older ones and take on the responsibility, and it's just an amazing thing to be a part of.
So if you give us a story of, from either place, Camp in the Hills or Campamento Honduras, what's something God is doing there through this church family?
So in Honduras, we go to different schools. There's this one school, the first year we went, we poured concrete. We poured this little concrete slab. And the next year we came back. Well, when we poured the concrete slab, there was probably like 50 kids that went to the school there. The next year we came back, and they're using it as a classroom space, and they're playing on it, and their school has probably grown 20 kids. The next year we come back, and with the money that we've given them, they've been able to build a new classroom, but we had to pour the concrete for the floor in like a walkway. So at that point, the school's probably grown to 100 kids. So just going back and being able to see these kids are able to go to school now, and these schools are based around Christ. And so being able to see how these kids are not only able to get an education, but get to experience Christ through what we're doing it's just really rewarding, being able to see how they grow.
Camp of the Hills, for those of you who don't know, it's not a camp for your average everyday church kid. It's mostly kids from the foster system. to get to go to camp. They don't have to pay, but something has gone wrong in their lives. They're in a bad spot. We work a lot, so you don't get to interact with the kids a lot. Our job is to feed them. There is a little time, though, when the kids get to serve dinner, that they interact with them. And a lot of times, there'll be a little lull, and I'll get to go out and just watch. And it's amazing. You watch them, they're laughing, they're joking, they're having a great time. And for that few minutes, if you looked at it, it looks like every other camp you've ever been to. They just look like your normal kids. And that we get to help play just a little role in having these kids that come from often very difficult backgrounds to experience God and have a week's respite. It's just a big blessing. In Honduras, was it 2 years ago, we get a call. Well, we didn't get a call. They come down and said, hey, you know a little bit about construction. You come and look at the church. We got this wall, and it's made out of mud bricks. I said, okay, we'll go look at it. And me and a guy from Legacy, Corey, we go look at it, and sure enough, the wall that's holding up the ceiling it's bowing out and it's moving. And it's pretty clear that within a year or two, this roof is going to fall and be a mess. And so Carson said, well, I think we can probably get the money to fix that. And so I'm like, cool. Maybe by next year we'll come back and it'll be fixed. And so the next year we come back and Carson's like, yeah, we got the money for them to fix the wall. What he didn't tell us was, we're going to fix it. So we spent 4 or 5 days, not 3 or 4 days, forms and concrete and sweat to reinforce this wall. And all of this is to say, I didn't build Camp of the Hills. I didn't do much at Camp of the Hills. I showed up for a week and we fed some kids. I didn't build the mud bricks on the church at Honduras. I didn't put up the roof. I didn't go out into the villages and get the members to come to church. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just showed up for a few days and got to be a part of God's story. And that's the awesome part. The money that we give, the time that people give, it lets us be part of God's bigger story. And I think that's the real blessing that we are for those.
Amen. Would you tell Scott and Emmy thank you for sharing with us today? Will you put this in there? All right. We're going to continue our month of missions. If you have your Bible, go to Luke chapter 10. We'll be there in just a minute. If this is your first Sunday with us, I want to say thank you for being here and welcome. My name is Kale, the preaching minister here. And for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about missions. And yes, we're trying to raise a bunch of money for our missions. And if you have not had the chance to participate in that, we would love to extend the invitation. We are short of our goal at this point. I will say that we trust that God will give us what we need. But if you have not had a chance to participate, we would love for you to do so. And there are some cards in the back you can grab on your way out, and you can go online and give there as well. And so we've been thinking about what it means for us to participate in missions, both through our giving and through our prayers. And today we're going to talk about what it means for us to be sent. I remember the first time that I went on a mission trip. I joined my church there in Oklahoma City, and we went to Mexico. And I knew some of the details, but I didn't know all of the details of what I would be getting into. Kind of like Honduras, we served a bunch of different places there, but what they had when we showed up was a field. It could have been a field anywhere. I mean, it was just a normal field that you'd find, right out here outside our door, and we camped for the week. And so I had been camping before, but not for a week, and you had to figure out how to take a shower outside with a bag, and I'll leave the bathroom situation out of it, but let's just say it was abnormal, to say the least. There was a cost to going on this trip, and there were so many wonderful memories, so much joy, that sometimes when you start to talk about it, a little bit like Scott was saying, you can kind of feel selfish a little bit. Because you can start talking about it and all that you got out of it. We did good work. We served other people, but we got a lot out of that. Let's read from Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 1. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. Don't take a purse or bag or sandals, and do not greet anyone on the road." Now, I don't think this is surprising to any of you here, but when our writers of the Bible, when they wrote the stories, they did not break it down by chapters and verse. And just because we're in Luke chapter 10 doesn't mean that Luke knew he was in Luke chapter 10. You know what I'm saying? And so when he writes after this, what we should do as good biblical writers or readers and studiers, we should go back and what is the this? What is he talking about? Because especially if you're using the Bible app, you're on Luke chapter 10, and for all you know, it's like there is nothing before this and there is nothing after this. There is just this right here, And so what he's talking about after what? Well, in Luke chapter 9, Jesus has his 12 apostles. And for the first time, he has sent them out. And he has given them authority to go out and to preach, to teach, and to heal. And then they return and they kind of, decompress their stories and what had happened. And then just one chapter later, for us, Luke chapter 10, Jesus is sending out 72. And I wish we had all of their names. I wish we had all of their stories. And we knew who had been sent out. But what Luke wants us to know is that there is an expansion happening. That the kingdom and the work of the kingdom is expanding. It was not enough for just 12 people, but now it's 72 are being sent out. Luke tells us this story for a reason. And it might remind you of something. At the very least, I believe that Luke has something on his mind. In Genesis chapter 10, right after the flood, we are going through Noah's sons and the rest of his lineage. And in Genesis chapter 10, the writer there is giving us all of the sons from this family. And what it's going to become is the nations of the world. And in Genesis chapter 10, you get something like 70 or 72 nations represented. It's a report of how the world is being reformed again. And I think what's happening here is Luke is looking ahead. And at the same time, he's looking behind. Because for our biblical writers, 70 is going to represent all nations. So Luke is looking ahead and he's foreshadowing. Jesus is sending out 72. And he says, I am on the way. It's where he was about to go. I think what Luke is trying to tell us is that this kingdom is for everybody. This kingdom is for the whole world. It's for all people. Salvation, Jesus, is for everybody. Jesus here has this sense of urgency. The harvest is plentiful. The workers are few. I need you to go. And so people are ready to say yes to this kingdom. And the kingdom needs more workers. People who are willing to say yes. People who are willing to be sent. The story continues in Luke chapter 10, verse 5. When you enter a house, Jesus says, first say peace to this house. If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you. Stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Don't move around from house to house. When you enter a town and are welcomed, eat what is offered to you. Heal the sick who are there and tell them the kingdom of God has come near to you. But when you enter a town and are not welcomed, go into its streets and say, even the dust of your town we wipe from our feet as a warning to you. Yet be sure of this, the kingdom of God has come near. So here's what Jesus is commanding them to do. He has just given the apostles this authority, and now he's expanding that and giving the 72 this authority. He's giving them the same authority that he shares. The authority to preach, to teach, and even to heal. And so the apostles, they go out, and the 72, they go out, and they can perform miracles just like Jesus. They can do the kinds of things he could do. And what he wants them to know is that you carry with you this gospel of peace. And what he's going to put them in conflict with is not other people, but it's with spiritual forces. And that story will come in a minute. Now, after my freshman year of college, I said yes and went on a mission trip to Nairobi, Kenya for 6 weeks. And as you heard last week, it's a long time on planes to get to Nairobi, Kenya. And so when we landed, it was about 6:30 in the morning. And so the people that greeted us at the airport, they're ready to go. It's 6:30 in the morning. Well, we were a little bit jet lagged. We're not quite ready to go. But we didn't know how to tell them that. So we just started. We just went. And the local missionary there said, we're going to drop off your stuff. And then I want to introduce you to the church. And so we went around that day from house to house. And we got to know some people. And if you know something about Nairobi, Kenya, Kenya is a former British colony. They're big into tea there. If you know anything about me, I'm big into coffee. I'm not so much into tea. And every house we went to, they said, "Would you like some tea?" And what are you supposed to say? Yes. From that point until today, I have not had as much tea as I had on that day. But we went from house to house. They offered us tea everywhere we went, and everywhere. Because I had read my Bible, I knew you have to say yes. This is what Jesus tells us. Eat what is offered to you. And so we did that. I think a couple of things. Your gospel writers, they write to different audiences. Luke is written to a Gentile audience. Again, he has kingdom expansion on his mind. 2 times in this passage, he has mentioned food. And what you do when it's offered to you. I think Luke knows that food is going to be a critical issue for 2 reasons. The first is this. The Jews have some food laws that will prohibit them from eating with other people. Not only what they eat, but who they eat with. Luke knows that this is coming, but that the Gentile audience will be a challenge for them. And in Acts chapter 10, he will start to address this. The story will, and Luke will dictate that. Food is critical to the spread of the gospel. In fact, for the second reason, we've talked a lot about hospitality, about the power of sharing meals together. Just like when I was in Kenya, just that hospitality, that grace, that love that you feel over a shared meal. And Luke knew that it was going to be difficult for these food laws. I think he's starting to set the stage, starting to set the scene that whenever food is offered to you, whoever offers it, you say yes to that. He sees that in the example of Jesus. Now, if you were to sign up to go next summer to Camp of the Hills or to Honduras or to Sam's Place in Kenya, there will be many meetings between now and then. There's going to be a lot of information given to you. You're going to know exactly what flights you're on and things like that. You're going to know exactly where you're going to stay. Somebody will provide a packing list for you. And if you are someone who's like me, I'm not the pickiest eater in the world, but I'm also not the pickiest eater in the world, If you want to know, what am I going to eat there? They will give you some of that information, okay? So you kind of know what you're walking into. Or, as another way to say it, it's exactly the opposite of what Jesus does here, okay? Jesus says, I am sending you out. Where? I'm not sure. It's when somebody will greet you, when somebody will open their home to you. What should I take? You should take nothing. Whatever is on your back, right then and there, that's what you go with. Should I take some extra money? No, don't take your purse. Don't take anything for that. Jesus says, instead, you will look for the hospitality of another. You will look for someone else to open their home to you. You will look for somebody else to feed you. You'll be completely dependent on somebody else. And I think this is why our first century church practices radical hospitality. Because they knew that when they were sent out, they relied on it. And others are being sent and will rely on them. Jesus sends them out with practically nothing, except he sends them out with his authority. He sends them out and he says, be courageous. He sends them out and he says, you will be faithful in this. Be faithful and trust that I will provide through my people. But Jesus also says that you might be rejected. You might be rejected. But whatever response that you get, whether someone welcomes you in or if they reject you, the purpose is the same, to prepare them to receive Jesus. It is to preach that the kingdom of heaven is coming in the person of Jesus Christ. See, the focus is not on what you bring, it's not on who you are and the authority you have, but the focus is on who is coming behind you. The focus is on whose way you are making. It's not about you, it's about Jesus. Jesus did not then, nor does he now, do everything for his disciples, but what he does do is he empowers you to accomplish the mission that he has before you. This story finishes, starting in verse 17, and it says, "The 72 returned with joy and said, 'Lord, even the demons submitted to us in your name.' Jesus replied, 'I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the powers of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven.'" I love this scene here. He has sent them out. He has given them practically no instructions. But one key thing, preach that the kingdom of heaven is coming. And when they return, they are filled with joy. It's kind of like what we've seen up here. We heard last week from the Beals and this week from the Gwines, and we hear the joy that people have when they say yes, when they have been sent. But Jesus says that's not what you rejoice in. Not that you have this authority. You rejoice that your names are in the book of life. You rejoice in the relationship that we have. So as we step back from Luke chapter 10, there are some things that I want to pull out of it, lessons for us even today. But before we do, I want to just say this. These people were sent into the world, and I believe that God is still sending people into the world. I believe that when people have said yes to him, when they are his disciples, that you are all being sent somewhere. And so we gather here every Sunday morning, and this is an important moment. But this is not the moment. We need the times that the church is gathered, but we are a church that is sent back into the world. And so this message is for us, just like it was for them. And so the first is this. The first thing that we need to remember is that there is a harvest waiting. There is a harvest waiting. I think so often we can look at our world today and we look with scarcity. That if you go do any reading about the state of the church, you will see that our culture is kind of moving past this era of Christianity, and it's a post-Christian world. And not only that, but there is the rise of the nuns, people who have no faith. And a lot of times we can look with sorrow and with scarcity at our world today, and you think it's any different than the world that Jesus sent his followers into. But Jesus looks at the world not with scarcity, but he sees abundance. And Jesus sees that there is a harvest waiting for us. And again, he reminds us that you are not the Lord of the harvest. That's not your role. You're a worker. All you do is you gather what the Lord has already done. What the Lord has already done in the world. What we see is that God is still in charge. That God is still running things. And he says, pray for the workers. We need more workers. Even today, God is responsible for his church, and that includes this one. We are joining his mission in the world, but ultimately we are workers. We're not the Lord of the harvest. And that if ever you were to be concerned about his church, yes, we love and care for his church, but God has always been and will always be in charge. He is in control here. And so we say yes to wherever he leads. We know the harvest is waiting. We're open to where he sends us. We plan and we work to anticipate that but we don't impede it. And we don't say, no, Lord, you've only sent us to this field. And when God says there's a new harvest waiting for you over here. It's because ultimately the second thing we need to remember is that we are called to trust in him. To trust Jesus wherever he sends us. And that includes us individually, but it also includes this whole church. Wherever he sends us, whatever he calls us to do, we trust him in that. It won't always be easy. Look at what he commands his disciples to do. He commands them to take nothing. They don't know where they're going to stay. They don't know where they're going to eat or what they're going to eat. But he says to trust me. You know, I love sharing the stories up here of the people in this church who have said yes and gone here or there. And by no means is this going to be an exhaustive list of people you're going to hear from. That I know that there are lots of people who are trusting God and are engaging in his mission one way or another. But there's a cost involved. I mean, what Scott didn't tell you is that Scott essentially leads our Mission of the Hills with our youth ministry. Scott is responsible for setting the menu, making sure the food gets purchased. That's a big job that he does. He takes a week off of vacation to do that. It's a big cost to him individually. He's trusted God when God has prompted him to say yes, just like many of you have done as well. Jesus sends us out and he says, take nothing but faith in me. And Jesus does not lie to them. He sends them out to a scary world. He does not arm them, but he says, you will be like sheep among wolves. And that's still how he sends us out today. And the third thing to remember is that this mission that we engage with has far more significance than we ever typically remember. Jesus said he saw Satan fall like lightning, and it's a reminder to us that this battle is not against flesh and blood. And we don't go out into the world and we're not at war with what has happened in our world, but what we are engaged with is in this spiritual battle. That we believe that the kingdom is coming and that he seeks the dominion of the one who currently rules. Jesus' kingdom is coming and it won't be stopped. That he will find a way, whether it's with us or without us, but we're not called to impede that. And ultimately, what matters most is our relationship with him. Jesus gave you authority. You have the same authority as those who are sent. By the power of the Spirit, he sends you with that authority. We can accomplish what he sets us out to accomplish, but in the end, that's not what we're rejoicing in. We rejoice in what we are called to go send out, that the kingdom of heaven is coming. We point people back to Jesus, and that's all we are called to rejoice in. Not in what we've done, not in what we will do, but in him. That's who we rejoice in. What matters most is not our successes or the authority he's given us, but just that we have a relationship with him. That's what we are called to spread far and wide. And so very practically, as you reflect on these reminders, there's two things that I would ask you to do. And I know the first one's going to sound like I said it last week, and I did. But the first is I want you to become a prayerful person. That I want you to pray that God would show you where he is sending you. That he would show you the places where he is going to use your gifts and talents, where he's going to use your discipleship. Because I believe that God is sending us all out. So we want to be prayerful that our eyes would be open to that. And the second is this, that as you reflect on that, as the Spirit starts to tug on your heart, that you would say yes to him. That you would say yes in wherever it is he is leading you. For some of you, you are going to say yes, and you will go with us to Campamento, Honduras next summer. Some of you will go to Sam's Place in Kenya with Dawn next summer. Some of you will go with our youth group and go to Camp of the Hills. But many of you will go next door. Many of you will go to the cubicle or the office that you work next to. Many of you are being sent to the people that you see regularly. That God has put you in a place for a reason. He has been prompting you. And it's time for you to see yourself as sent by him into the places that he's put you. This is who we are called to be. This past week, I was honored to participate in a funeral that happened this week. And it was my favorite type of funeral, which I know sounds weird, but it was a person who was 99 years old and had lived a faithful life. And if I have one prayer for all of you, it's that that's what your funeral would be like. That you would live to an old age and that they would be able to say that you lived a faithful life. And as I got to know this person better and hear from her family and know her family, I started to see that she was the kind of person who said yes. That God said, here's how I want to use you in the world. First for your family, and then for those that are right around you. And over, she said yes. She saw herself as being sent into the world. And she said yes. I don't know where God is sending you, but I know that He has done something in your life, and He wants you to tell everybody about it. That there are specific people that are in your path that you know, and God is going to use you to proclaim that message that the kingdom of heaven is coming. As we close today, our shepherds and their wives will be around the room. And we want to invite you to pray with them. And if you don't know where God may be sending you, that may be a great place to start, is just to pray that prayer. God, where are you sending me? And pray it with one of these couples. If you've never said yes to Jesus and you are ready to take Him on in baptism, to be His disciple, to be His follower, we can do that today too. However it is we can help you, won't you come while we stand and sing.